The phone rang sharply next to Terry Gilson, who was asleep. He awoke abruptly. What the heck? He let out a growl. The telephone rang again. He took it up. Hi. He mumbled in a deep, low cough. Mr. Gilson? Yes, this is Sergeant Preston with the Yukon County Police Department. May I speak with Mrs. Turvey? Wilson heard an authoritative voice in his ear. Who is that? Mr. Gilson, please link me with Mrs. Turvey. This is a police emergency. Again, a distinct and forceful tone. Gilson mumbled for a minute. He passed the receiver to the bare woman lying next to him. For you, it's the police, he replied simply. What? She seized the phone from him. Hello. Good morning, my beloved, unfaithful wife, came the excessively enthusiastic greeting. I hope you had a good night's sleep once you and your partner finished having fun. My God. MC Mick, is that you? You may rest easy, honey. I just called to provide you some information that you will require. MC, please. She tried. First and foremost, you can dispose of your house key. It does not work anymore. I also changed the code for the garage door opener. MC, please. It's not as you think. She cried. You don't know what I think, Sheila. But I did not call to discuss it with you. I called to let you know that your credit cards will no longer operate. You can also pick up your clothes and toiletries at any time from the plastic containers beyond the side gate. The voice became as icy as ice. No, MC, please don't do this, please. My wife pleaded desperately. It's too late, lovelies. I have already done it. But where should I go? She cried. In the legendary words of Rhett Butler, honestly, my dear, I don't give a darn. The tube slammed shut furiously. I had begun this process several weeks before, but this morning was the turning point. If I hadn't been so certain she was sleeping in Wilson's room, I wouldn't have attempted the prank. I was startled by how easy it had worked out and how empty the moment appeared. A couple's win, I thought. Too little, too late. I suppose that's a good way to characterize my predicament. My name is Michael McDerby. I'm 43 years old and work as a sales representative for a building supplies firm. No, I've been with this company for more than 20 years. I married Sheila Pratt almost exactly 20 years ago. We were going to celebrate our 20th anniversary next month. I considered our marriage a success, since we had 2 great children. Our first angel, Angela, was born a year and a half after we married, followed by our son 2 years later. I had an unconditional love for my wife and children. They were the essence of my existence. No guy could be more proud of his family than I was. We lived in a modest home that had all a family could want. We purchased our second home, a 3-bedroom split-level, 4 years ago. It wasn't new, but we tried to modernize it and make it our own new kitchen. The basement was then finished, with a workshop for me and a spacious family room for the kids to enjoy. We started with a garage where we parked our automobiles, followed by new furniture for the living and dining rooms. I felt like we had the ideal existence. I met Sheila while we were both in 11th grade. She was a beautiful blonde with a fantastic body, so it was easy to notice her. She tried out for cheering, but was unsuccessful. I played receiver for the soccer team and felt we'd make a nice couple. I asked her out shortly after school began in the autumn, and she said yes. We'd been dating for a few months, and Sheila had grown into a stunning young woman. I wasn't the only one who wondered if Ben and I were dating, but never confirmed it with Sheila. Our quarterback, Terry Gilson, asked her out, and she said yes. I couldn't understand it. I believed we were a couple, but clearly I was mistaken. Gilson was our team's standout. He was a large, gifted high school senior with a good arm and a competitive spirit unlike any other quarterback I'd ever seen. He was a coach's dream and nightmare. He had incredible talent and courage, but he couldn't follow directions, as the rest of the crew discovered. Terry wasn't a team player. Terry was only Terry. Our team concluded the season with a winning record, but I pondered how much better we could have done if Terry had followed the coach's script rather than making it up as he went. Despite his talent, he was irresponsible, which was extremely difficult for those of us who worked under him. Terry frequently boasted about entertaining each cheerleader at least once. I was glad Sheila wasn't a cheerleader, but I wasn't sure it would keep her safe. There was no point in becoming furious with Gilson. He was what? He was a ruthless womanizer. He saw these young girls as meat on his platter and planned to savor them. I was hurt that Sheila had fallen in love with him, but I knew there was nothing I could do. Terry would be gone next year, but Sheila and I would still be here. Perhaps I still had a chance, but it didn't materialize. I started dating Marilyn Erlacher because our school seating was alphabetical. Marilyn always sat behind me and kept an eye on me. Marilyn was a nice girl, but she wasn't who I was searching for. I wanted something more exciting, but that was too much for me. Erlacher. We got along well, and I believe she was impressed that a soccer player was interested in her, but that was it. In the spring, I began searching for a replacement. Meanwhile, Gilson had dumped Sheila in favor of another female, and she was now accessible again. I considered it, but given how she dumped me, I chose to ignore her. By the end of the year, she had met someone else. In 12th grade, I found myself on the sidelines again. Things were different. Roger Davidson replaced Terry Gilson as our team's quarterback, and he proved to be something different. He was a strong leader and an excellent team player. He looked to us to see who could do what. I kept thinking that this guy could be a coach. He understood what it takes to win and maximize the team's potential. The result was fantastic. I was catching passes like never before, and we were winning consistently. When Roger entered the huddle, he was quiet, explained the play, and ensured that everyone understands how to act. Everything was new to me, and I loved it. I continued to avoid Sheila. My ego was still hurting from my romance with Gilson. Roger began dating her, which did not surprise me. For all of his talent and leadership, he was a quiet guy who was difficult not to like. Surprisingly, I was okay with them if I couldn't be with her. Roger was my decision. I believe she felt the same way. Sheila wasn't the most intelligent girl in school. In fact, she received an average C grade and, like many of her colleagues, obtained a job. She had never planned to attend college. She must have recognized her limitations. She accepted a position as a bank teller at the mall. After high school, I lost contact with her. I was on my way to college and already fantasized about playing soccer, drinking beer with the boys, and dating only the loveliest females who wished to be with the soccer star by Christmas. Reality set in. I failed 3 classes, and while I cherished every minute on the soccer field, the rest of my school experience was less joyful. There was no crowd of girls ready to go out with me. Beer was downtown and pricey for my tight budget. Classes were a torture, and it was difficult for me to accept that the learning process was entirely up to me. There was no one to keep track of my attendance or assignments. It was a vastly different world. The grades put to the board at the end of the semester were unsatisfactory. I was at risk of dropping out. So I told myself that next semester, there would be no soccer or girls. I may as well do this. It was not easy. It was a completely different way of life for me. It was a challenge. I got through, but not by much. With 1 year of college under my belt, I questioned whether this was what I wanted to do for the next 3 years. If I asked the question, I assumed the solution was apparent. No. I got a job in a city office, and every morning, I'd get on the bus, work for 9 hours, get back on the bus, and go home. After a few months, I understood this could not be my future. I needed something more. I lasted nearly 2 years, but I was always yearning for something greater. If you ask me what my job path will be after high school, I'd have no idea. I wouldn't consider the sales category. A salesperson travels door to door selling brushes, culinary equipment, or periodicals. That is totally not me. When I learned about industrial sales, my outlook shifted. You had to know your product, demonstrate that it was as excellent, if not better, than the one they were using, and then persuade them to purchase it. More significantly, the technical aspect was something I could become excited about. I quickly realized that sales is a technique. What do you have that the customer requires? Why would he buy it from you? I sought for a transfer to one of the operating branches and was offered the option to work in an inside position. That marked the beginning. And as I watched, I realized that this was what I wanted to accomplish. I went to work while still living at home and without a car. When I transferred to the operations department, nothing had changed. I was a rookie with a low wage, and I got to and from work by bus. When I got my first paycheck, I decided to create a bank account. Until then, I had been living paycheck to paycheck, but that was about to change for convenience. I chose a bank near the bus stop and walked inside. As I neared the customer service counter, I came to a complete halt. Sheila Pratt was the name of the young woman who would be serving me shortly. I was a little concerned, but with a few more people ahead of me, I had time to calm myself and consider what I wanted to say. I hadn't seen her in 3 years, yet as much as I examined her, she was still as lovely as I recalled. Sheila quickly took care of the persons in front of me, and then it was my turn. "Hello, Sheila," I said, stepping forward. She obviously had no idea I was standing in line and was astonished to find me in front of her. "Hi, Mick," she said after a brief pause. "What can I do for you?" "I would want to open an account. I have to deposit my paycheck into it, of course." "Let me get one of the staff to assist you," she said, smiling. "Yes, thanks. It's nice to see you again." I made a weak offer. "Yeah, it's great to see you, too." That smile seems genuine to me. A week later, I returned to the bank to pick up my blank printed checks, and I saw Sheila again. This time I noticed she was strolling down the street, delivering mail. I studied her while I waited in line and wondered what was going on in her life. There was only one way of finding out. After picking up the box of checks at the service desk, I looked around for Sheila, and noticed she was standing behind the side counter, clearly doing nothing. I walked up to her. "Hello again," I replied, smiling. "Hey, how are things going?" she asked. I remembered her grin from when we were dating. She was genuine, honest, and incredibly attractive. "That is okay. I currently work for Polar Industries. I work in sales." I offered. "Well done. Do you like him? Does he have a promising future?" She inquired, seeming intrigued. "Yes, I enjoy the firm and the items it offers. I believe I'm lucky." "Good, Mick. I am delighted to hear that. Sheila, do you want to have coffee with me or anything else?" I asked hesitantly. "We may catch up." "Sure, that'd be nice. I will be free in a few minutes." "Why don't you wait for me, and we could visit the coffee shop next door," she suggested. "Great," I answered with a big smile. I'll be waiting out front on the bench where we started our reunion, and after a few dates, we were back where we were. I was 21 years old and had just started my work, and Sheila was seeking for a husband. I proposed the next spring, and she agreed. We got married a year later, in May, and we were both quite thrilled about our future. Angela was born around a year and a half after we married. She was a daddy's girl since she was born. When she was younger, if she was sad or sobbing, I would scoop her up in my arms. She'd calm down, grin at me, and everything was okay again. I'd always believed I wanted a son, but Angie was everything I could have hoped for. We have a son. 2 years later, Ben was born, and I was as thrilled as any father could be. Sheila was Ben's special parent, whereas I was Angela's special parent. It was the ideal family, I thought. Sheila frequently told me the same thing. She seemed pleased and content with our life. She told me we had our moments, but they didn't last long, and I knew I was lucky. I had an excellent wife and 2 great children. Just after Angie was born, I was thrilled when I was assigned a sales region. I took to the job like a duck to water, and within a few years, I was earning nearly double what I started with. Success generates success, and now I'm earning far more than I thought when I started at Polar. 5 years later, we were able to purchase our first home. It was a modest home, but it was entirely ours. She spent hours leafing through magazines, looking for the proper items. Angie and Ben both contributed, however, it was Sheila who decided the decor and colors. I just stood there, admiring how my family had come together. We celebrated our 10th anniversary at the same house, and approximately 30 people attended the party. I was proud of my accomplishments, but I was most proud of my family. My children were well behaved and thrived at school. My wife was an excellent homemaker and mother. Both parents thought that the sun and moon rotated around us. What else could I want? When Angie turned 14, she began menstruating. Sheila was first eager to assist Angie in understanding what was going on and how to deal with it. Things went good for a few weeks, until I noticed a shift. Angie did not appear to be as close to her mother as she used to be. It wasn't an evident difference, but I could tell since I was so close to my daughter. I couldn't figure out why this change in attitude occurred, and discussing it with Sheila proved irritating. She refused to address or acknowledge this transformation. She said it was my imagination and a man's inability to comprehend female psychology. I was still concerned, but because the rest of the family appeared to be unaffected, I let it go. Ben constantly appeared to be on alert. He and his mother were very close, and while I loved him as much as Angie did, I knew that if he had a major problem, he would seek treatment from his mother first. Angie did not bother me in the least. Every family forms alliances with their parents, and they deserve to be recognized and valued as a result of my accomplishment. I proceeded to advance in my job, and while I knew that sales management was not for me, I wished I had been given the opportunity. I was in my most productive and profitable territory, and I wondered what it would take to move further. It finally occurred to me that in order for such an opportunity to materialize, a post must be filled. Shortly after Angie started high school, Sheila approached me and asked whether I would mind if she returned to work. She'd been a stay-at-home soccer mom for 16 years and wanted to do anything other than wash, iron, and sew. I couldn't think of a single reason why not, but I asked her to make sure that whatever she selected didn't interfere with the children's life or our ability to spend leisure time together. She reassured me that it would not impede. After a few months of looking, she obtained a position as a receptionist at a car dealership. It wasn't full-time, which worked well for both of us. She had to work there every morning from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m., Monday through Saturday. Since I was playing golf on Saturday mornings, I believed that schedule would be ideal. It didn't pay well, but we didn't go hungry, and her extra money could be utilized as vacation pay. If it suited her, it also suited me. Our lives proceeded for a few more years until one day, Sheila returned home with an unsettling message. "I want Mick," she spoke with trepidation. "What?" "Terry Gilson is back in town," she added, carefully observing my reaction. "What brought him back?" "His father is a wealthy businessman. Terry is now the assistant general manager at his father's dealership," she explained. She was still not as casual as she would have liked to appear. "What type of dealership would that be?" I asked. I was fully aware of the answer I had received. "I mean, where I work." "Century Ford," she stammered. "So what does that mean for you?" I inquired, sensing another presence in the scene. "I am going to be. I was asked to take him on as an assistant," she eventually muttered. "Wow, that's a huge step, from part-time receptionist to assistant general manager. I hadn't realized they had such a vast workforce." I am certain my tone was sardonic, and I did not try to hide it. "Something you're not happy with," she said. "No. Did you date Gilson?" "I have played with him. We both know the type of guy he is. He boasted about all his victories. Is your name still on his list?" It was a cheap shot, and I knew it as soon as it rang. "That is dreadful. Are you saying you don't trust me?" she demanded. I had to move. "No, I am telling you that I do not trust him." Her cheeks flushed scarlet, and for the first time in a long time, she became enraged. "Take it back. You have no grounds to accuse me of anything. Furthermore, you just indicated I can't be trusted. She mumbled. I made no such statement. I said I didn't trust him. I responded. We both know what kind of snake he is. Leopards don't alter their spots, even after 20 years. I made it clear to her that I was not going to back down. Simply ask yourself this. I continued. How can a part-time secretary advance from entry-level job to assistant to the boss's son in a single step? That's. I would like to know. I demanded because I am qualified for the position. She snapped back. Terry claimed I was just made for it. You do not believe I have the skill, do you? She challenged. I don't know. I don't work there. But one thing I do know is that this is typical Gilson. He's setting you up, so be very careful, my dear. Now I was standing directly in front of her. She couldn't help but grasp my concerns and suspicions about Terry Gill's objectives, and I could only hope that my message had reached her. You're jealous. You don't want me to succeed because it would make you seem awful. That's the thing. You're jealous. She scoffed. The argument was going nowhere, and she wasn't listening. I exhaled deeply, turned, and went downstairs for a cold beer and some alone time. I had no illusions about Jill because he had seen an attractive woman who he believed he could obtain with no effort. What difference did it make if she was married? He presumably recalled me from high school and didn't consider me a hassle. I would keep a careful eye on the situation there. I was sure it would be a week before we could return to quiet waters in the house. My quarrel with Sheila was unfortunately overheard by our kids. It was difficult not to hear as we both raised our voices, as always when things settled down. Angie came to me while I was alone. Hello, Dad. Are you okay? Hello, Angela. Yeah, I'm fine. I lied. I couldn't help but overhear the argument, she said. Who is this guy? Gilson. The person your mother dated in high school. He was our quarterback and I played with him all year. I attempted to warn your mother. He's not a pleasant man and has no regard for women, I remarked regretfully. I don't think you were telling Mom what she wanted to hear, she whispered gently. No, I think not. I believe she sees this as a significant opportunity and a vital role. She will most likely go from part-time to full-time work, thus our routine will change, I recommended. It's fine, Daddy. I can help with the meals, laundry, and other tasks. I believe she will be making a lot more money now, don't you? Probably. We haven't discussed that. I will simply have to wait and see. Angie, I hope this does not turn out to be a major mistake for your mother, I said, placing my hand on her shoulder and bringing her closer to me. I just hope everything comes out well. As I expected, it was a full-time position with a salary more than double her prior earnings. So, in that regard, she was well compensated for her work. However, I had some reservations about the work. I carefully asked Sheila what she did during the day. She responded vaguely, but what I heard was quite unorganized. If I understood what she was saying correctly, it seems that she had to resort to when Gilson phoned. As time passed, I became less concerned about her employment. She left for work just before 9 a.m. every day and returned home shortly after 5 p.m. No overtime or special assignments, just ordinary work. As a result, we did not have to make significant sacrifices. My workday was longer than hers, and I frequently arrived home after 6 p.m. and left at 7 a.m. I wasn't home before anyone was awake, so my family time was limited to the evenings and weekends. Our love life was never very hot. It simply wasn't Sheila. We did it a couple of times a week, but it was nothing special. I tried to pique her interest in other more unusual activities, but she was simply uninterested. I couldn't complain, since we did this twice a week. After Gilson arrived, I kept a tight eye on the changes in our romantic lives. However, there was nothing extraordinary about it. We were doing essentially the same things we had been doing before. I have always tried to get along with my neighbors. It's much easier to live that way. The McDonald's on one side of us was full of peaceful, older customers. Their children had grown and gone away, and we had little in common with them. We were cordial and assisted one another when needed, but we were not close. The Romans who lived on the other side of us were much different. Their children were smaller, and Angie often babysat for them during our first few years there. We got along well with them and frequently had backyard barbecues and card parties at each other's homes. Jimmy and Felicia were arguably our closest buddies. Jimmy was an accountant for the town's large General Motors dealership. I had already forgotten about it, but as he went home in a rented van with the dealership's name on the side, I remembered a late Sunday morning when Jimmy was mowing the lawn before mowing and I strolled over to talk to him. "Hey Jimmy, how are things going?" I began. "Well, the typical stuff. I think it's fine." He grinned. "Yes, same thing. Say, I have a question for you." I attempted to make it sound casual. "Shoot. You work in a huge dealership. Does the general manager normally have an assistant?" "I mean, assistant general manager." "Yes, when the manager is not there, big dealerships normally have someone to cover for him, so this assistant has an assistant, such as Friday's girl." He stared at me oddly, and I noticed a few lights. "Come on." His face turned strange, and he appeared to be really uncomfortable. "Not generally." He eventually spoke. "I did not think so," I replied, nodding. "Thank you, Jimmy." I turned and returned to the house. My assumptions were confirmed. "Mick!" He called out to me. I paused and turned around as he approached. "I know what you are thinking. I have a few acquaintances there." "Let me see what I can find out about Cute," he replied quietly. I looked at him for what seemed like a long time, then nodded. "Thank you again." I am not sure why, after all this, I asked Jimmy the question. Well, perhaps I was terrified of the answer. There was no indication that anything was going on, but I guess the thought had crossed my mind. And it still is. Jimmy knew who Sheila worked for and her position, but he never mentioned it. I just dumped him, and he reacted as a true friend would. Even though Sheila was no longer at work on Saturday morning, I continued to play golf early. The Saturday after my conversation with Jimmy was cool and windy, but it didn't rain. I played with our usual foursome, and none of us played very well. The wind exacerbated the cold, and none of us were really comfortable. Well, we were all relieved to conclude the round and return to the clubhouse, as we normally did after the changeover. We'd meet on the 19th hole, and the winners would toast the losers. Today, my partner and I were declared winners. As I entered the room, I noticed Jimmy Romano seated alone at a table near the TV. He was enjoying a drink when I approached him. "I didn't realize you played golf," I replied with a smile. "I do not. You understand me better than that?" He laughed. "What brought you here?" I inquired, almost anticipating the answer. "I wanted to talk with you alone." He spoke suddenly. "Serious?" I nodded. "I was positive that was it. Give me a minute to settle with the winners, and I'll be right back." So it didn't take long for me to buy drinks for the boys and explain that I needed to excuse myself to meet someone. 5 minutes later, I was seated at Jimmy's table. "So I can only assume you've heard about my recent question," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "Yeah, I wish the news were better." "Mick, I really wish it was," he said sadly, hardly looking me in the eye. "Give it to me straight, Jimmy." "I can handle it," I said with more confidence than I felt at that moment. "Gilson is probably the most unpopular guy at this dealership. People I've talked to consider him a leech on the side of the business and completely useless. Well, this. He goes around and pisses off everyone he encounters. He has nothing to do because no one wants him to do anything. He'll just screw things up as he's demonstrated many times before." Jimmy stopped and sipped from his glass. "No surprise there," I said, trying to remain calm. "So where's Sheila?" He looked at me with the most haggard look I'd ever seen on his face. He really didn't want to tell me what he was going to tell me. Sheila sits in his office most of the day, occasionally typing letters and bringing him coffee. The only time she asks fast is when old man Gilson shows up and she quickly disappears into the parks department or the employee break room. When the old man leaves, everything goes back to normal. Well, this is me, says. I guess old Gilson doesn't know about Sheila and her mysterious work, I said sullenly. Jimmy only nodded. Then he paused and I realized there was more to it. Spit it out, Jimmy. I won't bite, I promised. The two of them go out to lunch about twice a week. They leave just before noon and do not come back until 2 or 2:30. Since she's been there, said I, finally shocked. No, it started a few months later, he suggested. One day one of their slick salesmen followed them. They went to the Carlton Hotel on Banner Road. That's a long way to go for lunch, I suggested Mick. There's no restaurant at the Carlton, he said in almost a whisper. I felt everything inside me clench. Well, this is locked in place. Unable to move, I could hear my intermittent breathing trying to get my thoughts in order. Although I suspected this might happen, I wasn't prepared for it. I cannot remember how long it took before I was able to form a coherent thought. I'm sorry, Mick. I really didn't mean to be the guy who, he muttered. I know, I whispered. Hopefully, I didn't want to hear it either. We had another drink with Jimmy and reminisced about the good times our families had spent together. There were many happy memories, but it felt like we were saying goodbye to each other in a way. I think we both realize now that things would never be the same again. Well, this could feel that pain in my gut, and it hurt. I drove home preparing to see Sheila and pondering how I was going to handle this revelation. I had been strangely calm with Jimmy and it seemed odd that I would be able to handle this devastating news. I tried to imagine any scenario that would make their afternoon visits to the Carlton anything other than sexual, but I realized it was unlikely what was on the surface was still there. It wasn't until I was halfway home from the golf club that I started to get angry. My head was spinning with 1,000 random thoughts all at once, and my emotions were in turmoil. Before it all started to boil down to one horrible fact: she had cheated on me and many, many times. I was a fool even though I knew the possibility existed. She made a fool of me and didn't even blink an eye without feeling the slightest sense of guilt. Day after day, she made me a cuckold. It was then with that realization that the anger began to build. I pride myself on being rational and not prone to rash behavior. I pulled over to the curb a few blocks from my house because I knew I was in no condition to walk into my house and confront Sheila. Moreover, it wouldn't be the smartest thing to do. In fact, I was pretty sure it wasn't. If I thought it was just a one-time fling, I could get over it and we could move on with our lives. I wish it wasn't. Apparently, it had been going on for a year all this time. Sheila had been playing the role of a happy housewife with a loving family. It was a deception of a very high order. Sitting in my idling car, I decided that this called for a very high order of payback. I will act as normal as possible, but on Monday, I will start the process to end this farce and get my revenge. I am determined that I will cause Terry Gilson and Sheila Pratt-Turvey as much harm as possible. I will act according to the rules and the law, but I will do everything I can to bring them both down. The rest of the weekend passed with excruciating politeness on my part. I was tight-lipped, not allowing my anger and frustration to spill out onto my family. There was plenty of time for that when all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. I counted the hours until Monday morning, when Monday finally came. I got up earlier than usual and left the house well before 7. I knew I had a few hours before I could get started on my problem, but I wanted to get out of our house as soon as possible. That morning, I knew that my sales manager, Larry Coleman, was already in the office, and I needed to talk to him about taking some time out of his day to address my problem. Our conversation took over half an hour. I knew he had guessed what might be going on in my family life when I explained what I wanted in terms of a vacation, and thankfully, he was receptive and agreed. He was a nice guy, and I enjoyed working with him. Just after 9 in the morning, I called David Murphy, our family lawyer, and asked for advice on a family matter. I knew it was not his specialty and was not surprised when he referred me to Lydia Parkratz. I had met Lydia in passing once or twice and had heard she was a very good divorce attorney. She wouldn't be cheap, but at this point the expense was the last thing on my mind. That afternoon, I had an appointment with Lydia for late afternoon. I knew I would be late, so I called home to leave a message. Angie answered the phone, which surprised me. "Hey, Angie, what are you doing?" "Home teacher professional development day," she said with a touch of mockery. "Ever notice they're always on Fridays or Mondays?" "Yeah, I noticed." "Look, I have an appointment late tonight, and I won't be home until 7, I think." "Let Mom know, okay?" "Sure, Dad." "Say, are you okay?" she asked with curiosity in her voice. "Yes, of course." "Why do you ask?" "I don't know. You didn't seem like yourself this weekend." "You weren't sick or anything, were you?" "No, I lied. There's nothing wrong with me." "You must have an overactive imagination." I laughed. We signed and I hung up the phone, wondering if Sheila had noticed my unusual behavior. She didn't say anything, but maybe she was being cautious. We'd have to watch for that. I didn't want to tip too soon. Meeting Lydia came as a shock to him in many ways to begin with, regardless of the reason. Sheila got half of everything in the divorce. The house, the cars, everything. The only good news was that her income was such that I probably wouldn't have to pay alimony if I could prove infidelity. Judging by her reckless behavior, I doubted I'd have any trouble getting proof. As for the children, I would have to prove abuse, neglect, or some other horrible crime to get custody in this jurisdiction. Children were almost always given to the mother. Angie was 18 and could make her own decision, but Ben was only 16 and would have to spend almost 2 years with his mother. I felt bad, but Lydia said I probably couldn't change anything. That's just the way the system works. That's when things got interesting. Lydia knew of my overwhelming desire to punish both Sheila and Gilson, and she said she could help. Since Gilson was her boss, I could sue both him and the company. He worked for his co-defendants in the divorce case. In other words, since so many people knew about their little game and did nothing to stop it or record it, we could sue them for a very large sum of money. Better yet, none of that money would go to Sheila. Lydia said she would make inquiries about Century Forward and begin the paperwork for the divorce proceedings. At this point, the reason for the divorce remained open. I was to decide whether it would be irreconcilable differences or infidelity. Lydia suggested that since their liaisons were so predictable, it would not be difficult or expensive to get some photographic evidence to solidify case. I told her I would think about it when I got home that evening. A happy Sheila greeted me, informing me that my dinner was already in the oven, and she poured me a glass of wine. I was immediately suspicious. Such behavior was unusual for her. I went upstairs, changed my clothes, washed my face, and went down to dinner. When I sat down at the table, Sheila sat down too, also with a glass of wine. "I have some interesting news, Mick," she began with a broad smile. "I've been invited to the Regional Dealer Convention next month in Marysville," she said proudly. "Really? Just you?" I asked, almost knowing the answer before I even asked it. "Well, no. Terry and Kurt Jenkins are going to," she said with some nervousness. "I see. And how long does this convention last?" 3 days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'll be back on Sunday." Now the nervousness was fully evident. "Sounds like you're looking forward to it," I quipped. "Yes, this will be my very first convention. I'm sure I'll learn a lot." She changed in an instant. Now she had that happy enthusiasm in again that she had a moment ago. "Yes, I do not doubt it," I replied with slight sarcasm as my mind picked up on my emotions. I began to realize that this be opportunity one was looking for. She almost set herself up to be caught. "So you're okay with that?" she asked uncertainly. "Yes, dear. I do not mind. I trust you." "I know you won't do anything inappropriate," I said with a straight face as I could muster. I saw the blush on her face for only a moment. She stood up, leaned across the table, and kissed me. "Thanks, Mick." I finished my meal in silence, and Sheila went back into the living room to watch some mindless TV program. I found it strange that I wasn't upset or angry or anything. I was numb. I had just let my wife out of town for 3 days and have fun with some butthole I hated, and I felt nothing. The next 2 days went fine, just normal. I got through my work, but my mind was a mess of thoughts, and I wondered how it was all going to turn out. I started thinking about Ben and Angie. What would they think? How would they react when I destroyed their mother? Would they hate me? I couldn't think of a way to protect them from what I was about to do, other than to call the whole thing off and let Sheila continue doing what she was doing. Deep down, I knew I would never let that happen. On Thursday morning, Lydia called me at the office and asked me to meet her in the afternoon. We set the time for 3, and I arrived early. I wanted to bring her up to speed and start the process. I made a few decisions. Lydia, something interesting happened on Monday. Sheila told me that she's been invited to attend the Regional Ford Dealer Convention in Marysville in 3 weeks. It won't surprise you to learn that she'll be going with Terry Gilson and another guy from their office. I paused, waiting for her reaction. You're right. There's no surprise at all. My sources say the whole thing was set up a long time ago. I guess she finally got up the courage to tell you on Monday, she said calmly. Yes, Monday. How did you know? I asked, with smile. Well, it's a trade secret, but let's just say she's not as smart as she thinks she is. Lydia grinned. I've decided we should try to get some pictures. Will that allow us to file an infidelity report? I asked. Yes, definitely. Now we know they use the same room in the same hotel every. That's silly. My friend is getting some photographic evidence this week, and that should be enough to make the case. But that's not all. She grinned. I looked at her satisfied smile and waited for the next news. Century Ford is owned by Terry Wilson's father, Knox Gilson, as you probably know. I know there is a morals clause in every employee's contract, and this will make our additional lawsuit much easier. In fact, it will be a piece of cake. She smiled slyly. How much do you think we can get them for? I asked, feeling an evil streak awakened in me. Well, we'll probably get half 1,000 to 1,000. But of course, we'll ask for a lot more. God knows Father Terry can afford it. She laughed. I really liked the sound of it. I guess the only bad thing is the kids. I can protect Angie, but I cannot do anything for Ben. I said, suddenly realizing how fast things were moving. I know. And there's not a darn thing I can do about it unless we get a judge who thinks Sheila's scum. We're going to have to live with it. I'm sorry, but I wish it wasn't so, she said with genuine pity. All right, Lydia. Thanks for the shovel job. I'll let you know when and where the convention will be held and what hotel she'll be staying at in case your boyfriend cannot find out anything before then. I'm tired. This whole mess had taken all the strength out of me. I wanted to go home and go to bed for a week or 3, hoping it would all be over by then. Of course, I knew it wouldn't be. There was still a long way to go. I managed to get through the next 3 weeks without arousing Sheila's suspicions. Maybe she wasn't paying attention, or maybe she was just so sure of herself that she didn't worry about it. On the eve of her departure, she had packed and carried her suitcase and travel bag to the front door, preparing to leave in the morning. She had no idea what this weekend had in store for her. When I got up Thursday morning at my usual time, Sheila was already up and eating breakfast. She was definitely anxious to get going, and she was pacing nervously around the kitchen. You're up early, I remarked coolly. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everything was taken care of before I left. Do not worry about it. Angie will take care of the housework, and I'll help her on the weekends. I take it you'll be home Sunday morning, I offered. I'm not sure if it will be in the morning or afternoon. We'll have to wait and see. It's Terry's car, so I'll let you know, she said hesitantly. She avoided my gaze. She knew what she had to do, but she didn't want to look me in the eye and admit it to herself. She couldn't know that there was no getting away from this weekend. Have a good time and behave yourself, I said without a fraction of sarcasm. She gave me a brief glance, then continued her uncoordinated activity. I couldn't remember ever seeing her so nervous. Do not help. She sensed the change in my attitude and was afraid I might recognize or suspect something I couldn't tell. I finished my coffee, kissed her lightly on the cheek, and left for the office. All day I wondered if she thought I knew something. It might ruin my surprise, and that would really upset me. I didn't tell Lydia or anyone else what I planned to do. Early Sunday morning, upon arriving at the office, I called Lydia and she quickly got on the phone. Lydia, can you confirm that we have pictures of Gilson and Sheila in action? I asked quickly. Yes, we have them, but I do not think you'll want to see them. Maybe after this is over, but for now, just let us deal with it. Okay? Do not. He spoke in a muffled voice, and you couldn't tell from her tone that she wasn't happy. I had to assume that the pictures were going to be quite denigrating. The only good thing about it was that it no longer mattered whether my little stunt on Sunday morning had worked or not. The matter was now settled. Are all the divorce papers ready? Yes, we can serve it, when you say so. I have a little surprise for her on Sunday morning, so I think we can serve her at her parents' house on Monday morning. Can I confirm that on Sunday? I asked. Yes, but Mick, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you? There was concern in her voice. No, absolutely not. Do not. I won't do anything to mess up. I promise. I hoped my statement was reassuring to this dynamic lady. I didn't want anything to ruin my plans. Good. I am delighted to hear that. Take care of yourself, Mick. I know these are hard times for you, but they'll pass and you'll move on. I know it. She said sincerely, Lydia. I couldn't have done it without your help. The only thing that remains difficult is telling the kids on Saturday about what's going on. I'm not looking forward to it, I admitted. I'm sure you do not. Good luck. If you need anything, call me or David. Okay. Thank you. I signed quietly, hanging up the phone. I thought about telling the kids that night, but changed my mind. One of them might decide to call their mother and warn her. I wanted to minimize that risk. Sheila called around 8 that evening and her voice was very chipper. She enjoyed the convention and the various booths. She had a nice room and the restaurant served very good food. She talked to me briefly but spent more time on the phone with Angie and Ben. She gave us her room number, 1228. When the kids went to bed at the usual time, 10 o'clock, I waited until I was sure they were asleep and then called the hotel and asked for room 1228. If Sheila answered, I would just say goodnight and say something nice to her. The phone rang at least 7 or 8 times, but there was no answer. I hung up. I watched Old Friday Night again around the same time as before. We had a brief conversation and then she talked to Angie and Ben. She spoke differently. Perhaps the excitement of the convention had passed or maybe something else. On Saturday, she called early, just before 6. Luckily, we were all home once again. Our conversation was short and not very personal. She was going out to dinner with a large group and according to her, wouldn't be home until late. I was not displeased. I was relieved when Angie, Ben, and I sat down to dinner. The table was very quiet. We all seemed to be immersed in our own thoughts. Finally, I realized that I couldn't put it off any longer. I wanted the table, put the dishes in the dishwasher and I turned to them both. Kids, I need to talk to you about something, I began. Ben and Angie looked at me and I sensed they were guessing what this was about. There is no easy way to say this, so I'll just tell you what's going to happen. I reached into my pocket and pulled out 2 shiny new house keys. These are your new keys to this house. The only person who has them is me. Your mother is not coming back to our house. I finally forced myself to say. Angie gasped. Ben's eyes widened and his mouth opened. For the past year, your mother has been in an affair with her boss, Terry Gilson. She betrayed me. You and her marriage vows. I can no longer live with her and will not allow her in this house. I paused. Daddy? No, Angie cried. Why did she do that? I don't know. But to be completely honest, it's not the most important thing on my mind right now. I know it's going to hurt you. There's nothing I can do about it. She has been with Mr. Gilson at least twice a week for the last year. That's over 100 times. My anger started to come out and I saw Ben wince slightly. This convention she's attending, it's nothing more than a smokescreen, so they can be together for the weekend. Well, they're not fooling anyone, I spat. Dad? What's going to happen? Asked Ben, still shocked by my statements. I filed for divorce and your mother will be served with the papers as soon as she gets back into town. There will be some other things happening with Mr. Gilson, but you do not have to worry about them now. I will let you know about them as they happen. I paused again. I'm sure they must have been shocked by my comments over the last 5 minutes. Does this mean I'll never see Mom again? Asked Ben on the verge of tears. No, I wouldn't do that to you, Ben. I know how important she is to you and I wouldn't do that. Maybe you'll live with her from the beginning when you're 18, like Angie. You can see both of us anytime you want, Angie. You can decide where you want to live. It will be your choice, I said, looking into my daughter's sad eyes. That sucks, Dad. It's splitting the family. It sucks, she said with tears in her eyes. Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, it's the courts that make those decisions, not me. I thought long and hard about it. I suppose I could tell your mother everything I know and just get on with my life. But I couldn't do that. I have to admit, I'm very, very angry with your mother. She lied to us. She lied to us. I do not think I could just turn the other cheek. I admitted. Ben turned, walked quietly up the stairs to his room and closed the door behind him. He's in shock. I thought I'll go up and sit with him in a little while when he's had time to realize what's about to happen. I turned to Angela and she looked at me sadly, then stepped toward me and hugged me. I'm so sorry, Dad. I know how much it hurts. I cannot believe she would do it again. She cried. I threw my head back and stared at my daughter again. Angie nodded, lowering her eyes. Tell me, please, I said quietly. It was 4 years ago. My period had just started and I was having trouble getting my period. One morning when I was in class, started having severe cramps. I went to the nurse's office and she sent me home with a note from my mom telling me what to get when I walked into the house. She and Mr. Morissette were sitting on the couch. I must have screamed and ran upstairs to my room. I heard them talking and moving around and then the door slammed shut. A few minutes later, my mom came into my room. At this point, Angie broke down and the tears began to pour in earnest. What happened next? I had to be patient. I had to let Angie tell me in her own way. Mom said if I told you or anyone else, you'd get divorced and I'd never see you again. She said the courts always give custody to mothers and you'll be so mad at her that you'll probably move out and I won't see you at all. She looked up at me and shook her head. I was scared, Dad. I believed her. I couldn't lose you. Not then. Not ever again. I guess I promised Mom I wouldn't tell anyone except Ben. I never told until now. I put my arms around her again and pulled her to me. That conniving jerk had used Angie's love for me against her and blackmailed her into silence. So Gilson wasn't the first and he wasn't the only one. I began to wonder how many there could have been. How could I have been so stupid? How had she managed to pull all this off without me suspecting a thing? Had I been so stupid that I hadn't noticed what was happening? Or was she smarter than I gave her credit for? Angie, I do not know what to tell you except that I love you. I will do everything in my power to be a good father. No matter what happens in the future, you're old enough to make your own decisions. And I want to know that whatever decision you make, I will support you. And it won't change my love for you. I didn't think I could say anything else. Thank you, Dad. I know that. And I know I want to be here with you. You need someone. And I think you're stuck with me. She smiled through her tears. We hugged again. I think I'd better go upstairs and talk to Ben. I'm sure it will be very hard for him to get over it. You said you told him about Mr. Morissette? Yeah. About a month after it happened, Ben said she was acting weird and he noticed that Mom and I were kind of avoiding each other. I told him what I saw. How did he react? I asked. That's funny. Like it wasn't a big surprise, or maybe he suspected something. Angie replied thoughtfully. I was sure he'd think I was lying, but he didn't say anything at all. He just mouthed off and kept it to himself. I nodded and stood up, heading for the stairs in Ben's room. I knocked softly, then turned the knob and gently pushed the door open. Ben was sitting in the bed, staring out the window with empty eyes. It took a few seconds for him to acknowledge me, but he still didn't say anything. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ben. You know I wouldn't hurt you if I could help it. I hope you understand. I couldn't leave things the way they were, I said quietly. He nodded and turned to me. I'm sorry too, Dad. Mom really hurt a lot of people, didn't she? He said in a barely audible whisper. Yes, yeah, I do not know what will come of all this, but I'm sure your grandparents be very upset with her. I replied. Why, Dad? Why? I have no idea, Ben. She's never once hinted to me that she's unhappy or dissatisfied with her life. Not a single hint, I repeated. I hate her, he suddenly muttered. No, no. Do not do this, Ben. She loves you. You can be sure of that. It's something else. Something I do not understand. Maybe she doesn't either, but do not let your anger consume you. I know you love her. Perhaps in time you can forgive her. I know she would never want to hurt you, Angie. Never, I said in as positive a tone as possible. He turned to me again with a devastated look. I put my hand on his shoulder to reassure him. After a few minutes, I got up and left his room, closing the door behind me. After I woke up Sunday morning, all hell broke loose. Sheila tried to call home, but I got Angie and Ben, and we headed out for breakfast. We may not have had much of an appetite, but we needed to get out of the house. I also turned off my phone and asked Angie to do the same with hers. I didn't want Sheila pissing her off over nothing but dew. I told the kids what I had done by calling early in the morning, and Angie laughed. Ben smiled, and I realized they approved. Why didn't I feel better then? After breakfast, we drove to the park by the river, and the three of us went for a walk. I think in some strange way we all felt better, perhaps because all the tension and anticipation of what was to come had subsided. Angie and Ben knew what was going to happen next, and they knew when it was going to happen. I myself had a knot in my stomach that would not dissolve. I was beginning the process that would end with the dissolution of my marriage and the breakup of my family. I still had to talk to my parents, but that was one of the two important things to today. Of course, I would also call Lydia and tell her what I had done. I dreaded talking to George and Amy Pratt, Sheila's parents. We were close, and they adored their grandchildren. I wasn't sure how they would take the news or which side they would take. I decided to leave it at that until Sheila could decide for herself. She needed a place to live, and I suspected she would run home. I called Lydia Pancreas first. I told her about my little stunt, and she too laughed at my recklessness. Now that's something I'd never want to get. She grinned. I hope you enjoyed yourself, Mick. Not really. Cheap revenge, I guess. But now she knows. And she knows some of the consequences. I said, noticing the note of anger in my voice. How about the kids, Mick? I spoke to them last night, and I think things are stable. They're not very happy, as you can imagine. But they understand everything. And I think we'll have to wait and see what the long-term effects are for them. I said, but I have another surprise. What? Lydia was confused for a moment. Angie told me that about 4 years ago. She, her mother, with another man. Sheila threatened Angie. She told her that I would divorce her, she would get custody, and they would never see me again. She blackmailed her into keeping quiet. I concluded, my God, could she have done that? asked Lydia in amazement. I thought I knew her. I was wrong. I do not know her at all. She's just a disgusting woman. I said more with regret than anger. Lydia must have been wondering what to do next. After a few minutes of silence, she spoke again. Stay close to Angie and Ben. Mick, they need you to be there for them. It's going to be heck for them for a while. Be there for them, she concluded. Thanks again for your help, Lydia. As soon as I know where Sheila ends up, I'll let you know and you can serve her. We signed and I slammed my cell phone shut. It would be much harder to reach my parents. The conversation with my parents was mercifully short. I described the situation and their first reaction was concern for Angie and Ben. She's just. I recounted my conversations with them last night and how they seemed to be fine today. This seemed to reassure my mom and both said they would talk to us later when things had settled down. I wondered when that would happen myself. I turned the phone off again. It beeped, saying it was waiting for a call and I was pretty sure it was Sheila. She wasn't on my list to talk to today. Angie, Ben, and I sat down on a picnic bench in the park and I explained that I didn't want to be near our house for the next few hours. I expected their mother to rush home to try to get in, finding that her key was useless. She would surely make a ruckus. She's just had we go out of town and stay there until a late dinner and then come back. They agreed and we talked about where we could go. There was an open-air affair in a small town a few miles south and we decided to see what it was all about. The fair was very interesting and fun. We ate a few hot dogs to get us through dinner and overall enjoyed an old-fashioned country fair. It took our minds off our problems and allowed us to think about something else. We didn't get back town until almost 7 and stopped at a nice restaurant for dinner. We knew that sooner or later we would have to face changes in our lives. But on this last day, we could get away from it all and find some peace and quiet. She's just got home. It was almost 9. Sheila was nowhere to be seen and the house was dark. I parked the car in the garage and we went inside, turning on the lights as we went. Nothing had changed in the house since we'd left for breakfast that morning. The children went to their room and got ready for bed. I turned on the TV but there was nothing interesting on. So I went to bed too. It was a restless night for me. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I knew that my phone call and serving the divorce papers would have consequences. It was only a matter of time. I had the phones when I got up Monday morning. I didn't expect to hear from Sheila so early. I was wrong. Almost immediately the phone rang. We didn't have ID so I had no idea who would be calling this early. I decided to tempt fate. Hello? It was a cautious greeting on my part. Mike, please. We need to talk. I was Sheila. Of course. What is there to talk about? I asked in a low voice, trying not to disturb the children. My God. MC, I'll tell you what I can explain. It's not as you think. She moaned. That's the second time you've said that. What do you think? I think I challenged. It wasn't like a novel. It was just a stupid mistake. Do not ruin our marriage over a stupid mistake, she pleaded. You must think I'm the stupidest person on the planet, Sheila. I know for a fact that you've been having fun with Butthole Gilson for a year, no less. And now I know that Francis Morissette is one of your buddies. We got pictures and all the proof we need. It won't be pretty, Sheila. And you have no one to blame but yourself. I promise you it will be ugly with those words. I hung up and disconnected the phone again. I came to work and informed Larry Coleman that I was divorcing my wife, and if she called, I would ask him not to transfer the call. He agreed and immediately went to Gloria's switchboard to inform her of our request. I went back to my office and tried to burrow into the papers on my desk. Everything was going well until about 11 in the morning when the phone rang. It was George Pratt, my father-in-law. Good morning, George. I can guess why you're calling. I apologize for not warning you and Amy in advance, I said preemptively. I think I understand, but I'd like to hear it from you. You've always been straight with me. So tell me what the heck happened, he asked reproachfully. I recounted my warnings to Sheila about Gilson, what I had learned about her affair with him, and her other connection with Morissette. When I finished with a condensed version of her activities, there was a long silence on the line. My God, he finally said, slowly and softly. I had no idea she was capable of such a thing. Are you absolutely sure about that, Mick? He asked, hoping there was a glimmer of relief in his words. I'm very sorry, George. I'm afraid I'm not only sure, but I have photographic evidence. I said, feeling sorry for this. Fine man. He deserved better from his daughter. She's staying here for now. Mick, do you plan to start divorce proceedings? Yes. All the paperwork ready? She'll be delivered either to work or... Well, I'm sorry, but it can happen at your house. I apologized. I understand. I do not mind telling you that this will hurt not only her, but her mother as well. I know it's not your fault, but... Well, it doesn't matter. I hope we'll still enjoy visiting the grandchildren, Mick. He finished? Hopefully. Of course it is. This isn't about you or Amy, George. I would never do that to you or the kids. You're always welcome here, I said sincerely. Thanks, Mick. I'm sorry, but thanks, he said sadly, and hung up when I put the phone back on the stand. I was emotionally drained. I expected there would be more moments like this in the weeks and months to come. I had to prepare for them. I learned that Sheila had gone to work that morning and, amazingly enough, had not yet lost her job. Gilson had no idea that all of this would come crashing down on his head at some point, and apparently decided to let things run their course. When Lydia confirmed that my wife was on time for work, she sent a bailiff over to her. And no sooner had she had her morning coffee than the divorce papers were in her hands. According to observers, she immediately broke down and ran out of the building. I believe she ran to her parents' house, but that wasn't the most interesting part. Shortly thereafter, Terry Gilson and Knox Gilson were served with court orders, stating my intention to sue for damages based on alienation of affection and willful disregard for corporate responsibility, namely failure to comply with the morals clause in specific employee contracts. The claims included punitive and compensatory damages in the amount of $5 million. Let the circus begin reconstructing the story. Much later, I learned that Knox Gilson had a showdown with his son, Terry, and practically cut him off. No more easy jobs, no more rescue from situations with husbands. And if he didn't pull himself together, no more inheritance. Knox had indulged his son for the past 20+ years and was finally at the end of his tether. Sooner or later, the sprouting teenager had to get back on his feet. Terry did the completely predictable thing. He went out and got drunk. Since he had been kicked out of the dealership, he had nowhere to go but to his townhouse. He disappeared into this cave for days. I knew the wheels of justice would turn slowly, foolishly. Sheila had decided to contest the divorce until Lydia provided her lawyer with the evidence. We had, including photographs. That was enough to beat the heck out of her. Lydia would do her best to limit the amount of my financial punishment, but worst-case scenario, she would get half of everything, a reward for her perfidy. The week passed agonizingly slowly. I went to work, but I couldn't pretend to be efficient. Larry was very understanding and patient, but I knew this couldn't go on forever. I needed to think about my future as a single man and a single parent. It was a frightening prospect. I was mowing the lawn in my backyard when I heard a commotion in the driveway. A car door slammed and a few seconds later, I heard someone pounding on my front door. Neither Angie nor Ben was home, so I walked around the side of the house and ran head-on into Terry Gilson. He looked like he'd been dragged behind a farm tractor for several miles. He was a mess, but at one look at his face, I knew it wasn't good. That was the last thing I remembered before he hit me with his big right fist. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital. I didn't really wake up, but I started to experience small bouts of unconsciousness. I was lying on my back and felt a numbing pain from my head to my groin. Apparently, it took me over 24 hours to finally regain consciousness. I was floating in and out of consciousness, barely catching bits and pieces of the here and now. At some point, I realized that someone was next to me. I felt a hand, but I couldn't open my eyes, or at least I didn't want to. They were like two marbles rolling around in the bottom of a tin can. I heard a strange voice, but although it was familiar, I couldn't connect it to my memories to see who it could have been. I tried to remember what could have brought me to this place, and after a while, I remembered Gilson's face and then his fist. A day or so later, I found that my mom and Angie were at my bedside almost the entire time I was in the McHugh. I tried to smile at them, but it hurt, and I hope they realized how grateful I was to have them around. I think I heard Angie tell me Ben was coming over after school, and I tried to smile again just thinking about it hurt. It was over a week before I recovered enough to talk to my doctor. He started literally from the beginning. I had a concussion, the result of hitting the wooden frame of the garage door when Gilson hit me. I had a dislocated right shoulder and a badly bruised upper right arm. I had 3 and possibly 4 broken ribs. I had severe bruising of my kidneys and even more severe bruising of other internal organs. My testicles were badly swollen, and it was feared that I might lose one or both of them. Finally, I had my spleen removed when it was discovered that it had ruptured. My injuries were the result of a single punch from an enraged Terry Gilson, followed by systematic kicking as I lay unconscious on the ground. What saved me was that Felicia Romano, who had witnessed most of the altercation, screamed bloody murder from her kitchen, causing Gilson to look up and realize he was being watched. He rushed to his car, backed out of our driveway, and rubber-tired the entire block. Felicia was smart enough to call 911, and that's how I ended up in the hospital. Gilson was identified by Felicia and another neighbor who recognized license plate number when he sped down our street, nearly hitting a mother pushing a baby stroller. There aren't many white 1964 Ford Galaxy convertibles in our town, and a couple of hours later, Gilson was seen leaving a bar and driving away in an inadequate manner. On top of all the woes, Gilson was arrested for DUI and resisting arrest. He just didn't know when to quit when they threw him in a cell. They matched the assault complaint filed by Mrs. Felicia Romano and my admission to the hospital after questioning Felicia. They charged Gilson with aggravated assault, assault with intent, and criminal trespassing. He was in deep crap, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy when he called his father from prison. Knox Gilson didn't answer the phone. I wish I could have been there, but I was unconscious and lying on the operating table having my spleen removed. 2 days after I started having constant lucid moments, a plainclothes officer came to me and asked me to testify. I told him everything I remembered, which wasn't much of face red with anger and a big fist. He asked what might have prompted the attack, and I told him about Terry's affair with my wife, the divorce, and the lawsuits. He nodded a couple of times and thanked me before leaving. Epilogue: the divorce property division judgment was not too favorable to Sheila. I will buying her share of our house. They gave her the absolute minimum and no alimony, as well as an emphatic lecture on her contribution to my injuries. Knox fired both Terry and Sheila. She was on the job hunt when our divorce became final. Her name was toxic in some circles, and I doubted if she would ever find a decent job in our town. Ben lives with Sheila, but I understand from Angie that their relationship is not what it used to be. I see Ben every week on weekends. We got a break from the judge. He seems to be stronger, but he's not the same kid I remember from better times. Angie is Angie. She's my girl and makes sure I'm on top of things. She manages the house, my diet, and exercise program. If I didn't know better, she could have been my mother. My folks have been a pillar of support and helped us when needed. They have no idea how important that was in the last few weeks. I just didn't need any more pressure. George and Amy, thank goodness, have remained friends. They are deeply disappointed in Sheila, but she is their only child and they feel obliged to support her in her time of need. Having been around is a big plus for them. They are spoiling him in a way, but I do not mind. I just want Ben to get through this and come out of it in one piece. Angie stops by to visit. She and her mother talk to each other again, but I get the impression it's an awkward at best. The lawsuits, of course, will never go to trial. They have Knox. Gibson won't let that happen. According to my lawyer friends, Dave and Lydia will settle for a very large sum, and I'll be secured for years to come. Even after taxes and legal fees, I already know I'll be able to take care of Angie and Ben's college tuition and provide them with a car. At least some good will come out of this whole mess. Physically, I have recovered as much as I can at all. I lost my spleen, but my kidneys, ribs, and shoulder are almost healed. I go to physical therapy 3 times a week and will continue to do so for a while longer. I still have pains that come and go daily. The doctor thinks my testicles are 80% functional, but I haven't had a chance to have them tested yet. They have? Haven't. I really do not have much enthusiasm for the opposite love right now. When I have the money from the trial, I intend to buy Jimmy and Felicia something special. Jimmy has been there for me when I needed him, and Felicia may have saved my life. Nothing will be too extravagant for these two. What happens next? I ask myself regularly. I'm still reeling from what Sheila did to us, but I suppose in time I'll get over the worst of it. I quit. Polar Industries at least tried to. Larry didn't want to hear about it. Instead, he was giving me an indefinite leave of absence. Someday I'd have a lot of money, and I was trying to decide what I should do them. They haven't. I think I know. Frankly, one of my best customers and an old friend from when I first started in sales wants to retire and sell his building materials business. It's a good business with a well-balanced trade between retail and construction customers. He is part of the Build Right buying group, and that helps him compete with the big stores. Dave Murphy and I are going to meet with old Frank and see if we can make it happen. Ben was first in line to look weekend and summer jobs when he found out about my plan. It doesn't make any difference. I want to keep him close and make sure he's okay while he gets through the next few years. They have no adolescence as hard enough as it is. And then there's the broken family. I look at Knox and Terry Gilson and realize that this is what happens when you are not involved or close enough in your children's lives. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened to me and our family. I'll be the first to admit that I took it personally and wanted revenge to the fullest. I still feel the same way. Perhaps if I had only had to deal with Gilson, things would have been different. I guess I can imagine how he might have swayed and charmed someone like Sheila. But when I learned about Morissette and how she blackmailed our daughter into silencing her, all thoughts, compassion vanished. Dave says Terry will spend 2 to 4 years in prison for assaulting me. We discussed a civil complaint as well, but there will be no one to sue. His father had disowned him. He is unemployed, lacks skills, and has no future prospects. When he is released from prison, he will be in his early 50s. A dark future awaits him. There is nothing else we can do to injure him. Amazingly, Knox Gilson contacted me when I was in treatment. He apologized for everything that had happened and for his deadbeat son. I accepted his apology as sincere. He was well aware that the emotional damage his son had done to me was accompanied by physical damage. We shook hands, and I raised my opinion of Mr. Gilson Sr. a notch or two. And here you are. Sad story. I thought I had the perfect family. We talk. I was sure I had the perfect family. I can look on the good times we had together or with. Maybe someday I can do the former, because right now I'm still dealing with the latter. Thank you for taking the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed the story, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a tale to share with me regarding your own or someone else's circumstance, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.